Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Really glad to have you with us. It's Mike Griffith later on. Some fun stuff off the top for us, at least in a roundabout way. It's going to be fun. ESPN said something I think is kind of interesting. In one way, complimentary to Georgia. In another way, maybe not quite so much so. We'll kind of get into that. Also, Kirby Smart addressing what has been one of the big questions over the last few weeks of what exactly does it mean when you talk about players beginning voluntary workout? Well, Kirby Smart was asked that question a week or so ago, had a very interesting answer, and given the fact that UGA players are going through the paces and all this right now, seems appropriate to hear from Smart on that topic today. We shall do that. Really glad to have you with us. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, and it begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and warn you about something. I am going to get on a little bit of a soapbox coming up here in a couple of minutes. I'll try not to do it for super long, but I think there's one or two things that kind of have to be said, and so we'll do some fun stuff on that here coming up in just a moment. I want to begin the show this way. So ESPN has given Georgia a little bit of a backhanded compliment. On the one hand, putting it up there with the very best coaching jobs in all of college football. On the other hand, saying that its placement in that spot is, well, let me let Adam Rittenberg's the writer. Let me let you read. If you're watching on video, it'll be on your screen. If you're radio podcast, I'll read it for you. Including Georgia in his tier 1 jobs in all of college football. And I always love these kinds of rankings, these kinds of lists. That's always really fun for me. Listen to what Rittenberg, the ESPN writer, says about Georgia. He says, no national title since 1980 is embarrassing, given Georgia's location in one of the nation's top recruiting states, but a previously reluctant administration has given Coach Kirby Smart what he needs to end the drought. If Smart fails, many coaches would crawl to Athens to take their shot. Once again, that's Adam Rittenberg, ESPN, including Georgia in the very best coaching jobs in all of the sport. And let me just say a couple of things here for a moment. First of all, on the notion that the commitment to winning being better, higher, more intense at UGA now than it may have been in previous years, I think most Georgia fans would say that, yeah, that probably seems about right. Even if you can't quite articulate what's different, just you look, you notice, it's obvious, it just sort of looks different. It just sort of feels different. All of that, it does feel like Kirby Smart, either because of his own ability to marshal forces or because those forces decided to marshal themselves. One way or another, the atmosphere, the commitment to winning at Georgia feels higher and deeper and more intense than maybe it's felt in the past. We'd probably say that. And on the notion that it's quote-unquote embarrassing that Georgia hasn't won a national championship since 1980. I say this all the time. The Georgia fans themselves are the ones that feel the weight of this more so than anything else. You know, I think a lot of rival fan bases think it's opposite. I think a lot of rival fan bases think that Georgia fans feel like that 1980 was just, the day before yesterday, and it feels all very contemporary. The truth is, UGA fans are the ones that are the most firmly aware of how long it's been since Georgia's won a championship. They're the ones that feel the most restless about all of this. And really, anytime I write something to DawgNation.com, that attitude kind of shows up in the comments, or when we're talking about things here on DawgNation Daily, that sense of, hey, when is it finally going to happen, and when is Georgia going to break through and win a national championship? It's the UGA fans that feel that the most. They don't need national writer to tell them that. They don't need opposing fan to tell them that. However, more on that topic coming up in just a moment. Let me instead deal with the feeling of what it must be like to be the head coach at a program like Georgia. One of the, Adam Rittenberg has ESPN 9 best jobs in all of college football. Recruiting resources, financial resources, fan adulation, almost anything you want to measure this on, Georgia is kind of right there in all of this. And yet there's also the added pressure that comes knowing that it's been a long time since Georgia has won a national championship. Let me tell you something about the kind of person that willingly takes that job, because Adam Rittenberg says, hey, people would be crawling to Georgia to get that job, and that's probably true. People probably would. But that doesn't mean all of them would be happy when they get here. The Georgia coaching job is not for everybody. It's just not. You have to be a certain kind of alpha because when you have all of the resources available, you are absent all of the excuses. And there's really only one thing to be determined. Can you win or not? Are you good enough to get it done or not? Rittenberg in the piece at ESPN.com uses the word fail. Will you fail or will you succeed? There's only one of the two options. There's no area in between. So maybe people dream of being a coach at a place like Georgia, but once you get the job, once you're sitting in the big chair, once you're leading this program, it's not for everybody. So if you want to, I guess, have kind of a nice positive thought here for a moment, something to consider here is the fact that thus far, through 4 years at Georgia, the job hasn't been too big for Kirby Smart. Now, he hasn't won a national championship yet, but Georgia obviously remains a big-time contender to win a national championship. But in terms of being overwhelmed by the expectations, being turned off by the intensity of the heat that always surrounds you, we talk about coaches being on the hot seat. At the biggest SEC jobs, there's a little bit of heat that just comes with a job on a day-to-day basis. The seat doesn't turn hot. The seat always hot, and you're simply just trying to win enough to keep all of that at bay. It's not necessarily pleasant, but it kind of is true. Kirby Smart has never been overwhelmed by any of this kind of stuff. And let me give you an example of this. I want to go way back in time for a moment. Now, I'm going to play some audio for you. And for whatever reason, this audio is old. This is like from the summer of 2017. I don't know why the quality on this is so bad. I don't know if Smart said this at like some Booster Club event or what. I really don't remember. This is not great audio quality, but what Smart says is worth having repeated. This is, now you got to understand the context. This is prior to winning the SEC, prior to making the college football playoff, prior to what has become 3 straight years of winning the SEC East. This is on the heels of an 8-5 season in 2016, where the only 2 highlights to really speak of whatsoever were, a week 1 win against North Carolina that wasn't much, pulling an upset against Auburn when they came into your stadium, and then eking out a win against TCU in the Liberty Bowl. The 2016 season was not a robust package of highlights. But even in the midst of that, in the summer between that and the start of the 2017 season, Kirby Smart still was not downplaying the reason why he was brought to Georgia and the reason why all the players that come to Georgia come to UGA, because of the idea of winning championships. If you don't believe me, hear it from yourself. A little bit of a weak audio, but nonetheless strong words from Kirby Smart.
As far as expectations, I know everybody wants to talk about it and ask questions about it. For me, it's important that you understand, as the head coach of the University of Georgia, I'm proud to be there, but we embrace those as the coaching staff. We embrace those as our players. When you come to the University of Georgia, the expectation is to win championships. And that is what we expect to do at the University of Georgia, and that's the standard that we'll be held to.
So Kirby Smart says, hopefully you can hear that, he says, we embrace the expectations that exist at Georgia. Me, my coaching staff, the players that come here, we know that when you come to Georgia, no matter what role you come to Georgia in, player, coach, whatever else, you come to Georgia to win a national championship. So on a day in which ESPN is saying, hey, this is one of the best jobs in college football, and it's also coming with the extra pressure of knowing that Georgia hasn't won a national championship since 1980, Kirby Smart, because he's an alumnus of the program, alumnus of the university, was aware of all of this when he signed up for the job. The resources available to him, the expectations for what he needed to do with those resources, and the potential penalty for what happens if you don't quite live up to what UGA fans think you ought to be able to do. Smart has never shied away from any of that, even in the midst of what was not a great season back in 2016, as the audio I just played for you indicates. But a couple more points on this for a moment. And this is where I got to be on a soapbox for a second, but I won't do this for very long, I promise. I always think it's interesting who the sports media chooses to be embarrassing and who the sports media chooses to be kind of lovable and romantic for not having won a championship. I'll give you a couple of instances. So Georgia's national championship drought dates back 40 years. But years ago, prior to that, we saw a lot longer championship droughts than the one that Georgia's suffering through that were treated very differently by the dominant media narrative. Think about Major League Baseball for a moment. Boston Red Sox won a World Series in 2004. Prior to that, had not won a World Series since 1918. How many of for those of you that follow baseball, can remember back to 2004, how many times did you see that that situation described as embarrassing? Now, there's a lot of literary Red Sox fans. Boston's kind of an academic community, so there's a lot of sort of fancy pants, smart people who are Red Sox fans. They write a lot of books about Red Sox fandom and the near misses, whether it was the 86 World Series or the 78, walk-off home run for Bucky Dent against the Yankees. That's a way of kind of romanticizing. It's not so embarrassing that you didn't win. There's a certain degree to which Red Sox fans were treated as lovable because they had suffered through some heartbreak. And the situation with the Chicago Cubs was even worse because that title drought lasted longer. Chicago's kind of viewed as sort of a cool town. Frank Sinatra wrote songs about Chicago. He didn't write them about Milwaukee. So therefore, being from Chicago, a lot of famous movie stars were from Chicago. A lot of famous movie stars had Chicago Cubs fandom. So therefore, it was kind of treated as kind of a cool romantic thing to be a long-suffering Cubs fans. Georgia doesn't get that treatment from the media because a lot of the media that writes these stories, that creates these narratives, those people aren't from the South. They're not from Georgia. So they don't give that kind of love to Georgia. It was the same thing when I was growing up as well. I'm not quite old enough to remember when Sports Illustrated did the whole Losersville thing for Atlanta, but I certainly grew up in the aftermath of that when the city that I'm from was kind of treated as kind of a Losersville type town. Chicago, Boston, they're lovable losers. Atlanta, just losers. The same thing for a program like Georgia. The Red Sox go 80 years without winning a World Series, and that's kind of romantic. Georgia goes 40 years without winning a national championship, and that's kind of embarrassing. So, do with that what you will there from that standpoint. I think it's Georgia fans themselves that need to determine how they feel about the championship drought that UGA is under. I've gone long here. I do want to squeeze in one more on this point. Can we see on the screen once again the other schools that show up in this Tier 1, according to ESPN, Adam Rittenberg, best jobs in all of college football? Here's where Georgia is placed in this group. Alabama's there, Clemson is there, Florida's there, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Ohio State. It's interesting who's not there. A program like Michigan no longer in a spot like that. You can probably highlight some others. A Penn State no longer in a spot like that. Obviously, you see access to high school talent mattering a lot in a discussion like this. But notice Florida. And remember this. We've said this a lot in the past, that Georgia has been able to enjoy a time in which that Florida as a program has kind of been down. Florida, the resources available to it, high school talent there in the state, financial resources that come to a program like that, Florida has probably not been using those as well as it could. The other takeaway from what ESPN says about Georgia and its placement as a Tier 1 college coaching job is Florida's there as well. And I've said before, I don't know that I believe in Dan Mullen's ability to build that program up to the level that would some people in the media think that it will. But eventually, Gators will be back. And as someone who's a Gator hater, I don't take any joy in saying that. But I don't necessarily disagree with ESPN mentioning Florida as kind of one of these Tier 1, jobs in college football. So something else to consider here, as Georgia works its way towards trying to win a national championship, it won't always have the benefit of a Florida program kind of sideways energy rolling in the opposite direction. At some point in time, it's going to have to do battle with a more mightier version of the Gators again, something to consider. So fun stuff from ESPN, a little bit of a backhanded compliment. Georgia among the best jobs in college football, but obviously pointing out how long it's been since the Dogs have won a championship. As I said before, you don't need to tell UGA fans how long that's been, and they are ready to see that drought come to an end. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to see you, and glad to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, the Apple Player, the Google Player, world-famous DawgNation.com. No matter how you get to us today, just really glad to have you a part of what we're doing here today. And by the way, the fun that we're having on this program does not end with just DawgNation Daily here today. Also fun stuff this evening coming up at 6 p.m. before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Great recruiting talk with Jeff Sintel. He has been knocking out of the park in that still relatively new time slot for Before the Hedges. And, of course, it's all made possible by our friends at Kroger. And don't forget, as we head towards Father's Day, great chance for you to do some great shopping for your dad, the dad in your life, there with Kroger, whether it be the greeting cards, to wish a happy Father's Day, a gift card for the gift, you want outdoor patio furniture, grill stuff, whatever else. All of that is available to you with our friends at Kroger. And let me also tell you about this. You can earn and save for yourself some bonus fuel points as well. It's 4 times the fuel points on gift card purchases between now and June 23rd. So make sure you take advantage of that with our friends at Kroger. And by the way, we may have a pretty big announcement coming up with our friends at Kroger here pretty soon. I can't wait to tell all of you about that. But for now, just know this. 6 p.m. tonight, Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. I think you're going to have a really good time with all of that. We'll have a good time ourselves here on DawgNation Daily coming up in just a moment. We'll talk to Mike Griffith. Interesting stuff. One of the things I'm going to get into with Mike, this is kind of an interesting day around the Georgia program, and I mean beyond football. Major League Baseball draft is today, and a couple of Georgia guys are expected to go pretty high. I saw MLB.com is going to mock draft up. Emerson Hancock looks like he may go number 6 overall to the Seattle Mariners, at least according to this mock draft. Cole Wilcox may go number 20 overall. So 2 UGA guys potentially going in the first round here. And listen, I don't follow the baseball draft all that closely, at least typically. It's kind of cool to see a couple of Georgia names here. One of the things I'm going to ask Mike is, it seems like almost bad luck, though, for a Georgia program that's done really well under Scott Strickland. Certainly the talent level has been raised mightily in this program the last couple of years. And here on what should be kind of a great commercial for your program, 2 guys potentially going in the first round, this is like the weirdest Major League Baseball draft of all time. We're not even sure if we're going to have a Major League season this year. A lot of you follow that news closely. I certainly do, being a big Braves fan. If we do have a Major League season, there's a very good chance we have no minor league baseball whatsoever. So if Wilcox and Hancock get drafted, where do they go? Where do they play? like what happens after that? It is a very, very weird time, and you almost wonder if what should be, and a lot of these drafts end up being this way for the various sports, what should be a commercial for the UGA program, the Diamond Dogs, hey, look at us, 2 guys in the MLB draft first round. Just the odd circumstances surrounding professional baseball right now make you wonder if UGA will end up getting the attention it probably deserves for a couple of guys who put very good careers together while playing for the Diamond Dogs. So we'll talk to that. We'll talk about that with Mike Griffith here coming up, and a whole lot more, including the workouts ongoing for the football program, and just exactly how many fans might we expect to see in Sanford Stadium this fall. Let's do all that with Mike Griffith right now as a part of DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we will bring in Mike Griffith here on DawgNation.com. Interesting stuff from him up there on the website over the course of the last couple of days. And a really good interview with Georgia basketball player Severe Wheeler that you may have seen on the DawgNation video channels recently. We'll talk about that with Mike before we're done here today as well. Mike, thanks for spending some time with us. Hope you're doing well and enjoying yourself.
Thanks, B.A.
So let me begin with this, Mike. I've seen some reporting out there on some discussions from UGA and some various options that might be available for Georgia when it comes to attendance in Sanford Stadium. I want to find out what you know about this, because it seems like we're getting a lot more concrete about what the various options are. Now, these are wide-ranging options from the tune of maybe a full stadium, maybe a much smaller version of that. What can you tell us about what's out there right now on that topic?
Yeah, we reported on that a couple weeks ago about these preliminary discussions and different models, different percentages, and talked with Dave McGarity this morning, and they've requested a preliminary plan. So it seems like deals where this is fluid, and these are just kind of ideas that are being thrown out there as far as where COVID-19's at. I mean, that's what it comes down to. There's really nothing new on this, and there's really no hard and fast news. It's more or less, here are some ideas under different circumstances, and I just got a hold of that document now from Bob Taylor over at UGA on the letter they sent in. But when I talked with McCarty this morning before our daily call, BA, he assured me nothing's settled, and these are preliminary plans to the extent that he didn't even know this letter had been sent out.
One of the things I did think was interesting, I think it was the Athens Banner Herald that reported this, if it is social distance with either groups of 2, groups of 4, groups of 6, and then spread out 6 feet apart after that, it sounds like there'll be no tailgating, at least on the basis of the way this is out there right now. So it looks like that if it's the more conservative plan of either no fans or very limited number of fans, that could also have a great impact on what's happening around the stadium there as well, and in terms of tailgating. Some folks have kind of wondered that, and certainly if we're talking about less than a full stadium in Sanford Stadium this fall and around college football, it seems like the campus environment itself is going to look a lot different there as well.
Yeah, it certainly could. It's a university decision, athletic department decision. And again, this is one of those, ask me August 15th deals. Nobody knows for sure where COVID-19 is going to be at that point. We don't know where our state legislation is going to be at that point. I know in Texas now they're saying you can have 50% of people in attendance, but that's Texas, and that's now. So you can follow these COVID-19 numbers and try not to stress more than we need to about what the complete unknown is.
Yeah, I'm one that obviously wants more fans than not. That's just the kind of college football that I've come to know and love. I'd tolerate it with less, but I want as many fans in the stadium as possible. And as you said, the news of Governor Greg Abbott opening the door for 50% attendance, outdoor sporting events and taxes, the fact that Talladega Superspeedway is going to have up to 5,000 fans coming up in a couple of weeks. Those may seem like small numbers, but they're important steps towards getting us back where we need to be. And I guess, Mike, where I would leave this discussion is, and this is obviously just my opinion, but for me, the door isn't completely closed on the notion that we will have full attendance, if not week one, at some point during this season. I at least think that's worth saying. That my opinion, my read on this is, while it may not be the most likely of all the various outcomes, there is still a possibility we have full stadiums this fall in college football, I believe.
Sure. Things change so fast. It was just a couple of days ago the World Health Organization said that, that it was very rare for asymptomatic COVID-19 carriers to spread the disease, and then yesterday there's a New York Times article walking it back. So, I hesitate to jump to any conclusions. I mean, ideally, we all move forward as a society and we get a vaccine, and this disease becomes less communicable, and we're all healthy. But there's an underlying reality to this that nobody wants to be the weatherman predicting rain. We've got a lot of hurdles to clear before we start talking about full stadiums and all these programs. As of right now, not even all the programs are back on campus, and there's still some talk that some of the 130 programs might not field football teams. So, and I'm trying. I honestly try to be guardedly optimistic. Yeah, I certainly don't want to be the one to say, yeah, we're going to have full stadiums, and then there's a spike or something. So right now everything's preliminary, and everybody just has guarded optimism moving forward with this.
So Georgia has started its voluntary workouts. Those began officially on June the 8th. Players have been showing up for a couple days prior to that. Kirby Smart, the Georgia coach, had met with reporters, a few days prior to that to kind of go into more of the details about all of this. We've been playing some of the audio on of that conversation on our show the last few days, and we'll hear some more of it later on before we're done here today. What's your general thought on things as Georgia gets back going here? They've been good enough to release a couple of videos that give us at least a little bit of a hint at what's going on, even if it's not very much of a glimpse beyond just a few seconds here and there. But players are back on campus. The work for the season has started. Where do you find all of that at the moment?
Yeah, the work, the video of the guys getting equipment, interestingly enough, the NCAA won't let them take any pictures of the players working out or take any videos of the workout. That's an NCAA rule. So they're going to guard the video of the player workouts. They're going to guard the video of players just in workout gear. So what we got was pre-workout when they were being issued gear and wearing masks. So it was better than nothing. I'd agree with you. It'll be very limited. Scott Sinclair and his strength and conditioning staff are allowed to oversee these workouts. Kirby Smart and his staff cannot. In fact, probably Kirby and his staff won't be around these guys in terms of supervisory roles and practices, even at walkthrough levels, until mid-July. Right now there's a 4-phase plan that's been introduced by the NCAA Oversight Committee that's going to be voted on this week. We had a story up on DawgNation on that yesterday, kind of outlining what this calendar looks like as far as when players can actually start practice again. The acclimation period, we believe, the 5-day period leading into the practice in pads, looks like that's going to be the first week of August. But what'll be different is that there'll be some July workouts, some limited walkthrough workouts with coaches the second half of July. So, to me, that's probably the biggest news that's come out, is that calendar that's been proposed that we all expect. It kind of gives you an idea of how they're trying to ease into this. But at this stage, Georgia has not released how many positive COVID-19 tests, if they had any. They haven't released that. They're not the only school. I believe there's other schools that haven't. We've heard reports Alabama had 5. We've heard reports Ole Miss had none. Tennessee said on Thursday and Saturday they had none. Kind of made me wonder if anything happened on Friday. Just a lot of real scattershot reporting. Unprecedented time. Trying to do our best to inform amid an unprecedented crisis.
Yeah, I will say when it comes to the positive tests themselves, and I mean this not just for Georgia, but the other programs there as well, that's not something I feel like I necessarily need to know. And I feel that way about the larger news overall, and I follow the COVID-19 news pretty closely. The total number of positive tests has always been, for me, the least interesting part of this because of how easy it is to misconstrue what it means by a positive test. So, ultimately, if Georgia never releases that information, I don't feel like I'm at a loss for not knowing it, nor do I feel like we know the whole story about a situation in Alabama where I believe it was reported they had 5. Auburn reported they have, they have 3. As we know, there is such a thing as asymptomatic cases, so just the presence of a positive test does not mean a player is necessarily sick. And so if we never hear this about Georgia, I really don't feel like I'm at a loss for not knowing that, Mike.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing about it is, at least the quarantine situations, and, if the player had been around other people or coaches or things like that. I mean, as it is, Georgia's already going to be working out in groups of 20 that are going to be subdivided into 7, so that if there is a positive COVID test, the other people in the workout group can be quarantined. As much control as, Georgia and the strength and conditioning coaches have over the student athletes, at some point they leave the building and they're on their own. And that's something Greg Garrity talked about last week, the importance of these players to maintain the social distancing and wear the mask in public so that, they don't contact COVID-19 outside of the football facility. And that's going to be a constant. That's why we're, still trying to grapple with, how many people can be in attendance at stadiums and what types of, checks could they have in place? Because as you said, someone could be, asymptomatic, and, taking the temperature may not be enough. And, as I said, the World Health Organization with their, 48-hour report and then take back of whether or not asymptomatic people can, it's just clouded. It's just very fluid right now, and far too soon to draw any conclusions or get overly excited.
Yeah, I think the confusion around the initial World Health Organization report on the asymptomatic cases kind of zeroes in on asymptomatic people who don't eventually show symptoms, and that's a very big difference. It's one of those things where if you're headline surfing for your coronavirus news, you're going to end up just getting a lot of misinformation, because in most cases the actual text of the news stories tells you more about what's going on, whereas the headlines, sometimes can give kind of a cloudy picture on that. Mike, let me talk about something different for a moment outside the boundary of football. I said this before you joined us. In a weird way, to me, what should be a good day for the Diamond Dogs, the potential that Cole Wilcox, Emerson Hancock go in the first round of the Major League Baseball draft, it's almost like what should be good news for UGA is obscured by what is, like I said, I'm not a huge follower of the amateur baseball draft, that closely in typical years, but my gosh, there's such a clouded circumstance around professional baseball right now. We don't know if there's going to be any Major League Baseball. We're not sure if there's going to be any minor league baseball. There's a really good chance there's no minor league baseball, even if the Major League guys do return. You almost wonder if that takes some of the spotlight off what could be a pretty good day for Hancock, Wilcox individually, and the Diamond Dogs collectively.
Yeah, we were fortunate. We did some Zoom calls with those guys on DawgNation, and we wrote some stories on Emerson Hancock and Cole Wilcox in the last week, kind of leading into this, trying to, as you said, promote some really good news about Georgia baseball. Really big news, if you think about it. The season in general. I mean, they were number 2 in the nation when all this shut down. And, this is, as you said, this is the time when Georgia baseball should still really be highlighted. But, it's still not everybody's cup of tea in the Georgia athletic community. And to your point with the baseball strike, I'm not sure how much play it's going to get on ESPN. I mean, honestly, I haven't watched a whole lot of ESPN without sports on television. We have plenty of commentary, just listening to DawgNation Daily every day, or Connor Riley's show last night, or I do a show Monday, Fridays. Jeff's got one on Wednesdays. I mean, my goodness, that keeps me so busy, and there's really nothing to draw me. Without the live sports, I don't go there. Just don't. So I'm not sure how much play it's getting on ESPN. I would hope that because it's an actual event, like the football draft was, you would certainly hope that they would get some attention on that. I know that Connor's got some coverage plans on that he talked about earlier. Looking forward to reading his stories. And then looking back at the Zoom videos we did with those guys, too. Those guys talked a lot about Georgia baseball and the direction they're going. And, boy, Cole Wilcox sure sounds like a guy that it's going to be a steal. Any guy that's 6'4" and throws 100 miles per hour, BA. Always been a Yankees fan. It'd be interesting to see where he goes.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird to think. You said this before too, with where the team was ranked of all the various UGA athletic, programs. The one you can make the case that was hurt the worst by the coronavirus lockdown may have been the baseball team, because they probably had the highest expectations and certainly had a bad taste in the program's mouth after the season ended shorter and sooner than they wanted to a year ago. And they'd been doing a great job selling tickets there, Foley Field and stuff like that. If any group of athletes at UGA would have loved to have had this year back, certainly the baseball players, maybe as much as anybody, have a right to ask for that back. They've really had something taken from them.
No doubt about it. I mean, this was a team that was, earmarked for the World Series. I mean, I know we said it last year, but you brought back so many guys. And yeah, they could come back if they wanted, but let's be honest. I mean, if a guy gets drafted in the first round, now the question becomes, if you get drafted later, I mean, it's only a 5-round draft. And, there's a lot of minor league baseball teams that aren't going to be operating. We're still waiting to see if Major League Baseball, and I suppose frankly, that's part of the turnoff. I mean, the money that's being discussed and the people that aren't willing to take. I know everybody has different opinions, and I don't want to get too far down that road, but the fact of the matter is it looks like there's a lot of greed. And I don't want to point the finger at owners or players. I just say fix it. I mean, let's have baseball. Let's have sports. And, hey, we're all having to give up a little bit. It's been a tough off season for everyone. I know that's why so many people are thankful you're still on your show every day and we're still producing our DawgNation content. But there's not a lot of live sports right now. And when you're sitting there waiting for live sports to happen and owners and players are finding reasons for it not to happen, it's kind of a turnoff. And honestly, baseball lost a large part of me during the '94 strike. I know I sound like an old guy now, but that really upset me. And I didn't go back like I was before. And this could be another blow if they don't get it together. So you hope for the best for Emerson and Cole, and you hope that wherever they get drafted, that their situation works out. I believe their finances, in terms of the slots that they're picked in, will stay the same as last year, so the finances should not affect them. But as far as what happens after their pick, I mean, they might have to wait till next spring if baseball can't figure something out.
Hey, a quick final thing for you. I know you had a chance, speaking of other sports other than football, to talk to Georgia point guard Severe Wheeler this week on video. How did you find him? And as he gets ready to move into more of a leadership role with this program, what was it like to get a chance to speak to Wheeler this week?
Yeah, it was enlightening. I mean, you and I both know that the SEC's had this policy about no live interviews going back to Peyton Manning, and apparently that's only recently been relaxed. And I reached out to Tom Crean and said, would it be possible? Severe Wheeler is, for anybody that's watched him or seen, he's a dynamic point guard. He'll be the face of the program the next 3 years. And he's an eloquent speaker. And, the George Floyd Memorial was taking place in Houston on Monday, and that's where he lives. And so, he was a natural guy to bring on the show and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this, about what's happened? And how are things at the University of Georgia? What's it like on campus? What's it like living around here for a student athlete? He shared a lot of viewpoints on that. He also talked about next year's team. He's got very high hopes. There's going to be 7 newcomers. It's another shuffle BA. But they got some pretty special guys coming in, older guys, transfers. So it's kind of a real win-now mentality. But to your point, Severe Wheeler was a very interesting interview and a very unique opportunity to do a live interview with a current UGA athlete. I hope that that's a sign of things to come.
All right, Mike, good to talk to you here on DawgNation Daily here today. Hope you have a great week, and we'll catch up with you very soon as well.
Appreciate it, BA.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, always interesting to catch up with Mike Griffith, and you should watch his video with Severe Wheeler, who I do think is – listen, I think that Wheeler quietly was a pretty good basketball player for Georgia a year ago. Obviously, Ant-Man got a lot of attention, and with good reason. Speaking of drafts, Ant-Man will obviously be a huge part of the upcoming NBA draft, but Wheeler's a good player, and he's going to have a lot on his shoulders next year. Mike may be a little higher than I am on the overall chances for team success for UGA next season, but I think that Wheeler is certainly a player worth watching. It was fun to see DawgNation get a chance to spend some time with him over the course of this week. You should check out the video there on the DawgNation video channels. As we transition to our SEC through, I want to point out something else that ESPN has done recently. I think this is pretty interesting. I'll show this to you as a tweet, and then I'll dive a little deeper on this. ESPN's own in-house analytics is called its Football Power Index. On the basis of the FPI, they're also able to crunch strength of schedule. To me, an analytics-based strength of schedule is always a better version of that, as opposed to just looking at wins and losses from a year ago, because when teams aren't playing the same level of schedule, the win-loss record can be kind of misleading. But on the basis of FPI, here are the 5 toughest schedules in the sport. If you're watching on video, you see that. Maryland, South Carolina, who was number 1 a year ago, at number 2 right now, then Alabama, then LSU, then Iowa. Only room for 5 on that graphic. I'll give you the rest of the top 10 here for a moment, then we'll talk about this just a little bit. Number 6 is Nebraska. 7 is Arkansas, which, by the way, I'll give a shout-out to some of our DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers, or I should say viewers here as a part of our RSN Andrews Cool Down. The show's going off the air. I've kind of made my case for Arkansas maybe being a little bit better than some have thought. I had some folks yesterday say, BA, have you seen how tough that Arkansas schedule is? So credit to them for bringing that up. Arkansas, number 7 strength of schedule, according to the ESPN FPI. You got Georgia Tech at number 8. They have to play both Clemson and UGA, so that factors into that. Ole Miss at 9, USC at 10. So that's the top 10. You saw the top 5 on your screen a moment ago. And there are a couple of things that are obvious takeaways from all of this. Even after all these years, there is still just sort of something about being in the SEC West that makes it really tough. Of the 10 toughest schedules in the country, according to FPI, you've got Bama, LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss. 4 of the 10 toughest schedules in all of college football, according to ESPN FPI, are from the SEC West. This is one of those reasons why I've said this before, that it's a gimmick and a trick to rank non-conference schedules. That kind of thin slicing of a schedule is, in my mind, almost totally irrelevant. You might as well say, well, who plays the toughest schedule in October? Who plays the toughest schedule in whatever else? Non-conference games in and of themselves, there's no justification for thin slicing that out and looking at just that as you look at who plays the toughest schedule. It's the totality of your 12 games that matters. And once again, the SEC West teams are just playing a much tougher brand of schedule than almost anybody else in the entire country. And by the way, credit to teams like Alabama and teams like LSU. In addition to playing the full SEC schedule, Alabama's crossover game against Tennessee, that may be a top 25 team this year. LSU's crossover game against Florida, that may be a top 10 team this year. Both those teams also go out and play big boys nationally as well. LSU's scheduled to play Texas. Alabama's scheduled to play USC. So in addition to toughest division in college football year in, year out, pretty tough crossover. And by the way, Alabama draws the card of having to play Georgia this year there as well. In addition to all that, they're also going out and doing non-conference scheduling there as well. Ole Miss is supposed to play TCU, I think, week 1. I think that's the Ole Miss opponent for week 1. So they've got a Big 12 game there as well. And the whole SEC West part of this is kind of weird to me. It's almost becoming a little bit like the NBA for those of you who follow that. Like, why is it that the West is always better than the East? And gosh, pretty much ever since the Jordan era, West has pretty much been better than the East. There are probably reasons, better GMs, things like that, but it's almost one of those things like there's no inherent reason why that half of the country should be better at professional basketball. It just sort of is. We're kind of getting into that realm when it comes to the SEC West there as well. When I was a kid, when the divisions first started, it was the East that was better for years and years and years, and I mean way better than the SEC West. Georgia was always a top 20 team, and you had obviously the Peyton Manning, Phil Fulmer era at Tennessee, and what Florida was doing. The SEC West was having a hard time matching that, other than Alabama at the very beginning of the divisional breakdown. But for a number of years now, there's been a huge imbalance in favor of the West in comparison to the East, at least according to the ESPN FPI. That does not show any time of slowing down anytime soon. Let me also mention one more thing about this. Speaking of teams that I've kind of touted being better than the experts might think, South Carolina is one of those teams for me. And this is not that I expect South Carolina to go 9-3 or anything like that, because as the ESPN FPI data says, given a schedule like that, that may be a virtual impossibility. A year ago, facing what FPI called the toughest schedule in the country, Gamecocks went just 4-8. Obviously, they did beat Georgia, unfortunately, in that discussion. But be very careful assuming that a team is not good because it's collecting losses. In South Carolina's case, when it has to play Georgia, when it has to play Texas A&M, when it has to play Clemson, teams that are expected to rank near the top of the country, you're going to find some losses somewhere along the way. But in terms of being more dangerous than some people realize, let's say against an opponent like Tennessee, maybe possibly against an opponent like Florida, be very, very careful about completely disregarding and overlooking the Gamecocks. I do think Mike Bobo makes a difference on the offensive side of the ball. For the most part, Will Muschamp has put together truly elite classes as a Gamecocks recruiter, but he has found some individual talent, especially along the defensive line. Guys like Zach Pickens and others come to mind here. This could be a year where, once again, even if the overall record's not all that impressive, a tough out on a week-to-week basis, that could end up being true for the Gamecocks. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, I want to turn our attention back fully to the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment. And one of the narratives that's been out there, and this is not just directed towards Georgia, it's directed towards all of college football, You see this a lot. There's even a story up at CBSSports.com about this. What exactly does it mean when you say voluntary workout? And there's kind of a laughing, part of that. The same thing is true, I guess, in the NFL as well, because I believe the OTAs are also supposed to be voluntary workout there as well, but no one really treats them that way. They're not having OTAs this year, but the whole notion of something being voluntary, people say, well, it's not really voluntary. But in the case of the coronavirus, what we've been dealing with, and different attitudes, some people comfortable going to restaurants again, some people waiting, some people comfortable getting their haircut again. I'm going to get my haircut today. I have to wear a mask, but I'm going to get my haircut. Some people comfortable doing all of that. Other people not quite, ready to do some of that kind of stuff yet. So the notion of a voluntary workout and what exactly does it mean to volunteer to be there, and just how much freedom do you have not to go? That conversation seems more relevant right now. When Kirby Smart met with reporters before the start of the voluntary workouts for Georgia this week, he was asked that question point blank. Hey, Kirby, what would you say to a player that doesn't want to be here? What would you say to a player, or maybe the family of a player, that feels a little concerned about the health situation that our society is battling against right now? And Smart gave a pretty detailed answer to that. I wanted you, in light of the fact those voluntary workouts have started, to hear from Kirby Smart on that topic.
First thing is I defer to a medical staff. We've got one of the best medical staffs in the country, in Ron Corson, Dr. Reestek. We've had multiple meetings with those guys. They've met with the parents of our players and been able to talk to them and educate them. There is no pressure, because at the end of the day, when you ask these players, to a man, every one of them will tell you they're working out. If they're working out at home, could you argue that home environment, wherever that is they're working out, local high school, local gym that's open back up, backyard, anywhere they're working out, that environment is more safe than one that's professionally cleaned, that's monitored and taken care of from our staff? As a parent, I would certainly feel much better about my son or daughter being able to go work in that environment where it's been professionally cleaned and taken care of, outside of where they're working out currently. And we found that to be the case with most of the kids we talk to. They're much more comfortable saying, well, if I'm going to work out, then I'm going to do it there. And if I'm not comfortable working out at all because I don't feel safe, that's my decision. That's my choice. That's something I get to make on an individual basis for each and every kid. And that pressure wouldn't be put on any kid to return if they're not comfortable with that. We bring their parents or guardians into that decision as well.
I think sometimes there's a certain pocket of person that makes a weird assumption about some of these football coaches because they do make so much money and because they are, certain kind of personality they display publicly. I think people have a way of reading in sinister motives sometimes of all these players. These coaches don't care about players. They just care about making as much money as they can and whatever else. And honestly, when you watch this kind of stuff unfold before your eyes, including the return of these workouts, I think you're hard-pressed to find any evidence of the kind of sinister motives that sometimes get attached to coaching, caring more about winning than they care about the people associated with their program. Honestly, I think college football's done, at least the best that I can tell, and admittedly I'm kind of on the outside looking in, but the best that I can tell, I think college football's done a pretty good job of kind of getting back to work on some of this kind of stuff. Kirby talks about professionally cleaning. It really goes beyond that in the weight room. It's not just the professional level of the cleaning, it's the frequency with which it is clean. It's been described that it'll have to be, cleaned in between every workout and things like that. They're not a lot of places you're going in public. They're going to be cleaned as much as some of these Georgia facilities are probably going to be clean. Obviously, this is a serious situation. You got to be, very, very careful. But whether it be not just Georgia, pull this back to 10,000 feet. Look at the other programs there as well. What I see are a lot of coaches that seem to care about their players and care about the sport and want to get the sport back and running again for the upcoming season. And the best that I can tell thus far, the various figures associated with college football seem to be doing right to take care of their players, which I think is obviously a very good thing. So we'll continue to follow that and see where it goes. But interesting to hear Smart address the notion of, hey, exactly what does it mean to a voluntary workout? And Smart says they don't want to come, they don't have to be here, but we're going to take good care of them while they are here. And I don't think you could say much else other than that. As I told you before, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger tonight, DawgNation video channel at 6 p.m. There's some interesting stuff out there kind of floating around with Georgia on the various recruiting storylines. I know Jeff Sintel will be all over a lot of that. Tonight, 6 p.m. Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to seeing that Mike Griffith mentioned a moment ago, sounds like we'll have some coverage as well when and if Emerson Hancock, Cole Wilcox, a couple UGA baseball players get selected in the Major League Baseball draft. We'll do some fun stuff on that. By the way, speaking of some fun, how about a Gator Hater updater? Let's let you go and say goodbye by reminding you it's been 1,320 days since those lousy, stinking Gators beat the Georgia Bulldogs. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. We'll take a lot of your comments. We got about 10 good minutes for some comments here today, so we'll do that on both Facebook and YouTube, and that ought to be a ton of fun to do. We can talk about pretty much anything you want to. We'll leave it pretty wide open. I do have to pull these up, though, so y'all give me a second to get them pulled up. We'll start on Facebook first, and then after that, we'll be off and running. And as I do that, remind you that it's hot outside, and if your air conditioning unit, if you're concerned it's not going to make its way through the warm weather season to come, get some peace of mind with a $99 tune-up from our friends at R.S. Andrews. They'll get your system back to factory fresh spec. That's good news. It's available online, rsandrews.com. Find out more about Dari, the whole team over there, and the great work they do to take great care of you. Water heater goes out. In many cases, they can replace that for you the same day. So find them online, rsandrews.com, and they'll do that for you. Let's do a couple of things. Michael Webb, thanks for the kind words. Let's see what else. Pretty good conversation, it looks like, going on here with some of the Facebook folks. Lots of comments here. Let's see what else is going on here. Oh, so Shelton Tucker's doing the Jamie Newman thing again. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's his opinion. That's his opinion. We haven't seen Shelton in a while, it doesn't seem like. And, listen, no one's going to say in the case of Jamie Newman, he is my pick to be this Georgia starting quarterback, and I'm assuming he will have a good season, even if I'm going to stop short of saying he'll achieve some of the top-end projections that have been out there for him from some other people. Obviously, you can't point to perfection at Wake Forest. If he was a perfect quarterback at Wake Forest, he would not be transferred. That's just true. If he was completing, 70% of his passes and throwing 50 touchdown passes and everything else, he'd just stay right there in Winston-Salem. Why? Or he'd have already gone to the NFL draft. Why mess up something that's working that well? Part of the reason why a guy like that chooses to come to Georgia is because he doesn't feel like he's been fully maximized yet. I don't mean to be Colin Cowherd and give you, some sort of strained analogy, but when you're looking to buy a business, most people are not looking for a business that already runs super efficient, because from that standpoint, there's very little value add you can provide. You're paying top dollar retail price for a business that operates kind of already at a maximum efficiency level. It's already as good as it's ever going to be. All you can do is mess it up. People kind of they sort of look for a business that's underperforming because there's, a little bit better value there. You can add value either through better systems, better whatever else, and you can turn what was kind of a fledgling thing into a more productive outfit. I think the same way with players there as well. Georgia has the opportunity to bring in a guy like Jamie Newman because it wasn't working perfectly at Wake Forest. And Georgia gets to, through its coaching and through its training and through everything else, take what is incredible athleticism, above average arm strength, everything else that kind of goes along with being a quarterback, and then make something out of that that's more than what Dave Clawson and the Demon Deacon staff was able to do. So if Jamie Newman was already perfect statistically, he wouldn't be coming to Georgia. He would either be in the NFL or he'd just stay in Winston-Salem. So a lot of what, and this is going to be true in the transfer market moving on in the future, a lot of the guys you're going to have access to are going to be coming to you because they hope that you as a program can get something out of them their previous program was not able to get out. Lawrence Cager's a good example of this. Cager did catch a lot of touchdowns for Miami, but for the most part, people last year were like, Cager's okay. We'd bring in people from the show from South Florida. Hey, how's Lawrence Cager? Is he a good receiver? Can he be in the mix at Georgia? Maybe so. We'll see. And they'll cite whatever, reason it was that made him want to leave Miami, not fully a part of the offense, whatever else. But my gosh, we found out Lawrence Cager, when we saw him, was like, this guy really is good. And Georgia's good at getting something out of Cager, and then he got hurt, and, things kind of changed after that. But the transfers that you will be able to bring in for the most part at all positions will be players that have some flashes of good, otherwise Georgia wouldn't want them, and some flashes of not quite living up to that potential, otherwise those players wouldn't want to leave the program where they currently are. And that's just the way that's going to go. Let's see a few more Facebook comments. Randy Hall says, are my comments showing up issues with Facebook possibly? I don't know, Randy. I'm seeing this one. Sometimes the Facebook comments kind of come in pretty fast, and so I don't know that I've seen all of yours. I don't really see much of anything during the show, but I'm seeing that right here. And by the way, Randy Hall mentioning Romello Brinson. That's one of those recruiting rumors that's out there. He says he picks Brinson to come to the Dogs this weekend. Randy, I'm hoping that Jeff will talk some more about that tonight on Before the Hedge is presented by Kroger. That's one of those rumors that's kind of out there, and I'm not quite sure where this one stands right now, but Brinson is one of those names we're watching for, I guess, one way or another. Graham Nicholson says Cager was a great transfer and playing for a contract. Yeah, and Graham, I think you're right. Almost all the transfers, Trey McKitty's much the same way. They're all coming here because they think they need that next thing to get them ready for the NFL draft. You know, these are graduate transfers, so that means that they're all going to be at least 3 years out of high school, so they're all draft eligible. They don't believe they're ready for the draft yet, and they're looking for some help to do that. And that's how a program like Georgia gets access to players like that. So I think that's right. Michael Webb says, when you're evaluating Newman, remember what's going to be around him. You know, guys like Pickens and some of the others. And I think that's true. Let's see what else. Keith Volt says, I think this will prove to be Kirby's best coaching staff so far. Luke and Monken are excellent hires. I think that's true. I will be very surprised if Todd Monken is not a really good offensive coordinator for Georgia. In fact, I would say that the biggest problem Georgia may have in relationship to Monken is how long they get to keep him. Now, does that mean he's going to be Joe Brady for LSU? Probably not. Those numbers, statistically speaking, are just going to be hard for anybody to match. It's almost like a perfect storm type situation. But I will be very surprised if Todd Monken's not a really good offensive coordinator. And that's a little bit of a reach because really, we saw Monken coaching, calling plays for the Bucs in 2018. We've seen various college situations where he's been calling plays. That's another guy, a little bit like some of the transfer players we're talking about. If Monken had a perfect coaching resume, he wouldn't be available for Georgia. He'd be calling plays in the NFL, or he'd still be a head coach, which he was at Southern Mississippi at some point in time. You know, the fact that Georgia has access to a Monken is only possible because things didn't go perfect at his last stop working with the Cleveland Browns, or kind of the overall total of situations before that. However, I'm pretty confident in Monken, and I think that the addition of Buster Faulkner as an analyst, someone that can kind of be leaned on, that's a respected kind of group of 5 level offensive coordinator as well. I'll be very surprised if Georgia's not in good hands when it comes to offensive coaching. Some of the same stuff that we've said about James Coley at the end of last season, I don't think we're going to be saying that about Monken. Now, of course, I would have told you that Coley himself would have been good offensive coordinator, so maybe my opinion doesn't matter a ton on all of this, but that is my opinion nonetheless. And I agree with you. I think that Luke's probably a pretty good hire too. That's another guy that, your biggest problem may be how long can you keep a guy like that? Although probably just given the way it ended at Ole Miss, Luke's got a little bit of rebuild he's got to do for a moment. Alan McGovern says Kirby needs to be hands-off. You hired the offensive coordinator, leave him alone. And that's another reason why I'm kind of excited about Monken is my assumption is that Monken has a level of gravitas that I don't know that the previous offensive coordinators that Georgia under Kirby might have had, Jim Chaney included. Chaney was an OC that could have gone a lot of places. He'd have been a Broyles finalist at Pitt for instance. But I think of Monken as being just a little bit more attractive, a little bit more sought after maybe than even Jim Chaney would have been prior to the start of the 2016 season. You hope that level of gravitas gives Monken the power to come in here, the requisite authority to say, here's the way I think that things need to be done, have it be listened to. Maybe James Coley just never quite had that. Maybe Coley had ideas that he wasn't quite ever given the freedom to be able to express. And maybe part of his resume was the reason why those ideas weren't given a full hearing. Monken, I think, is a little bit different there. That's my hoping. Go on YouTube for a couple of minutes. We'll get some of your comments over here. And we still got about. No, Sheldon says, I think it's James Franklin was Florida's coach, he would change the culture and take them over the hump. Yeah, I wish I could have talked more about this. I kind of got myself in a time crunch earlier. I've told y'all before that when we started the Gator Hitter Updater, part of the reason why we started it is because that's the measuring stick that I wanted Georgia to compare itself to. Not Georgia Tech, which will never be a real threat to Georgia, and frankly, kind of opponent you're always going to be punching down in the direction of. I wanted Georgia to measure itself against a program capable of providing a fair fight. Georgia is that. You mentioned someone like James Franklin if he was the Florida coach. Here's the thing. It's like, as much as I like mocking Dan Mullen, the truth is, it's almost like you don't want Mullen to truly spectacularly fail, because the idea that Florida won't get its next coaching hire right, odds are Georgia's just not quite that lucky. Florida got it wrong with Jim McElwain. I feel like in hiring Dan Mullen didn't fully understand what had caused things not to go well for McElwain. That I think Mullen's a little bit more like McElwain than maybe some Florida fans want to admit. Better game coach, it would seem, but not an expert recruiter. If you're at Florida, you're supposed to be collecting elite recruiting classes. Even Will Muschamp, as kind of a rookie head coach, was doing that. I mean, there's a bare minimum of top 10 classes if you're recruiting at a place like Florida. And for the most part, Dan Mullen has found the bottom part of the top 10 to be his ceiling. So, as I think some of our YouTube commenters are addressing, if you want, Dan Mullen to fail, the odds are the next coach of Florida will not be someone who takes recruiting lightly. It'll be someone who's aggressive about that. I'm not saying James Franklin would be the next coach at Florida, but if Franklin were the coach there now, it'd be a lot more dangerous for Georgia than Dan Mullen is. I think that's true. James Moore says your beard looks better than the Florida program. I think that's good to hear. I'm a little bit surprised that nobody said anything about this. I trimmed it way back over the weekend. I cut it way down. Just because I was kind of getting real bushy again. I think I'm getting close to shaving, and I said I was going to shave it today. Now I'm not quite so sure if I will. I have no idea what I'm doing about this, but James, thanks for the kind words nonetheless. Brady Pass Management says, how many times do we have to rehash this? Kirby thought he could build the Bama program from 2010 to 2014. Those days are done. Saban realized that, hired Lane Kiffin. Kirby has now realized that, and I believe that Matt may be right when he says that. The other thing, too, is I would have, if Kirby would ever trust me as wise counsel, which obviously he wouldn't, but if he ever did, I would have told him that even back then, hey, man, you need that extra offensive dimension. You got to have that for your program. You need that. And what's funny is, even though Kirby was, from a philosophical standpoint, doing things a little bit differently than I probably think he should have, the truth is it almost worked. I mean, Georgia was pretty conservative in 2017. In fact, it was really conservative. Look how many games it played where it didn't really ask Jake to throw the ball nearly at all. They almost won the national championship that year. Even in 2018, when Georgia supposedly had so many great receivers, no one eclipsed 600 yards receiving that year, and Georgia was still a very, very conservative team in most of the games that it played. And they almost beat Alabama. They had the lead in the game. Had they gone to the college football playoff, there are a number of teams in that playoff that year they would have beaten. I think it stands to reason they would have at least beat two, Oklahoma and Notre Dame. That's a fairly easy prediction to make, and then you would see what happens against a team like Clemson. So even in 2018, that conservative offense statistically was very good, and it almost won the national championship. So I'll really admit something. Even though my feeling, even from the beginning of the Smart era, was they needed to be more aggressive offensively, Smart doing things the way that he wanted to do has almost worked to the tune of a national championship more than once. So I think that ultimately our buddy Brady Pass Management is probably right that the evolution that needs to occur with the Georgia offense may be on the verge of happening now, but it's a little easier to understand why it's been slow to occur, just given the fact that the result, doing things Smart's way, almost worked. Jalen Jackson says the Bama hype's based on their program rather than their actual players. Mac Jones is still unproven, while Bryce Young hasn't taken a snap, but they aren't getting the same doubts we are with Jamie Newman. That's probably true. This is true in kind of the official and unofficial capacity. Alabama was granted access to the college football playoff in 2017 without winning the SEC. Georgia was not given that same opportunity in 2018, nor I think will it until it has won as much as Alabama has. And frankly, if I was a neutral observer here, I might say that's the way that it should be, that Alabama has earned more benefit of the doubt because it's won more than Georgia has. But I think ultimately you're right, whether it be unofficial things like, people like me spewing hot take, or official opinions delivered by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, because Alabama has been more of a fixture on the national stage, they are treated as more worthy of being given the benefit of the doubt than Georgia's probably going to be on. All right, let's do like one or two more and we get it go. Nature Gator says, BA, you have no bias when it comes to Florida and Dan Mullen, LOL. That's right. Nature, I call it right just like I see it, right down the middle. But you're exactly right about that. Tongue in cheek. All right, let's do a couple more. We got over here on Facebook. We'll do like one or two more. Kelly Groom says that Alabama's going to be so focused on 2nd 26 it's going to become their rat poison, which will help us win. I will say this, that and this is no bragging right for Georgia because 2nd 26 is still kind of a blight on all of us until Georgia gets back in that spot. But it has not been a perfect world for Alabama since 2nd 26. So maybe some of the Alabama bans spelled out 2nd 26, some of that kind of stuff. There's been a little bit of a reckoning for Alabama since then. You may be right about that. I'm going to see Troy Sadowski in the comment section, the former UGA All-American, saying that he's excited to see Jamie Newman's arm, mobility, and ability to extend plays and his threat to take off and run. Yeah, I love the way that Troy says that there. I've always felt like that, Newman may be a running quarterback, but he's coming to Georgia, I believe, to become a quarterback who runs. You don't want to put that athleticism on the shelf. You want him using his legs. But Newman, I think, has come to a place like Georgia to work with what I think he views as an expert coaching staff to fully develop himself as a passer. Because even if running quarterbacks or quarterbacks who run are more in vogue in the NFL than they used to be, that's still a league where your ability to deliver the football with your arm is what matters more than anything else. So that's why Jamie Newman's here. But while he's here working on that aspect of his game, UGA gets to benefit from the athleticism that you just can't teach. You've either got it or you don't, and Jamie Newman probably does. Last one. Zinty Allen says almost doesn't count anymore, BA. We're tired of almost winning, and Zinty's right about that. And that's part of the sentiment we set off the top of the show, and one of the reasons why I think Georgia will be motivated to make the change this year they probably should have made earlier. And that's a good comment to close it out with. Zinty, good stuff from you. We appreciate you being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. Don't forget to check out our friends at R.S. Andrews for your air conditioning, your heating, plumbing, electric needs. Your water heater goes out. In many cases, they can replace that for you the same day. Just find them online at rsandrews.com. Also, make sure you check in at ajc.com. Get your Atlanta news now. Debacle with the primary voting yesterday in Fulton County, DeKalb County, some Atlanta areas. What's being said about this? What's being done about this? Find out more about that at ajc.com, and you can kind of check in on all of that. Also, a little bit more on Cole Wilcox, Emerson Hancock, potentially drafted in the first round today, the Major League Baseball draft, the amateur draft. You can follow that at ajc.com as well. You have a great day. Thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down and DawgNation Daily. I'll look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We'll see you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.